Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Belle again. So today, we're going to talk about Trump, ancient Greece, China, and the U.S. China released a statement after a meeting between the U.S. and Chinese heads of state. Parts of the message are being reported with a heavy focus on what China called its, quote, red lines. A lot of the coverage is painting it as China letting Trump know what his boundaries are and them taking a tough stance with him. Sure, they're letting him know the boundaries, but these lines aren't new, and it's not really a tough stance. This is very similar to when China said they sought peaceful coexistence recently, and people wrongly read it as them being scared of Trump. It's a standard line. That phrase is in this statement too, by the way. But while they were focusing on the mundane, they missed the truly interesting part, and it deals with ancient Greece. Before we get to that, let's go through the statement real quick. It starts off by talking about how much progress has been made under the two current heads of state. Quote, "The two presidents have jointly brought China-U.S. dialogue and cooperation back on track." And then it goes on to list the advancements in the economy, trade, agriculture, climate, and so on. It's a very subtle way of praising Biden's diplomacy and encouraging the next administration to, quote, "review the experiences of the past 4 years and draw inspirations from them." Then it has a list of what I would say is advice for the incoming administration that could be learned from the progress of the last few years. I'll put the link down below so you can read it yourself. Some of it is, well, Trump's probably going to take it personally. The part being reported on as the red lines is, quote, "the Taiwan question, democracy and human rights, China's path and system, and China's development right are 4 red lines for China. They must not be challenged." These are standard Chinese foreign policy positions. Realistically, Trump isn't going to push much on any of these, except for the last one. He'll do that with his trade policies, and probably not really even mean to. This message is not praising of Trump, but this passage isn't the Chinese challenging him in some new way, despite the red line language. It's pretty status quo foreign policy stuff. With that out of the way, we can talk about the interesting part that gives us a very clear picture of where China sees itself in the world. It's the first piece of advice in the list, saying, quote, "First, it is important to have a correct strategic perception. The Thucydides trap is not a historical inevitability. A new Cold War should not be fought and cannot be won. Containing China is unwise, unacceptable, and bound to fail." Thucydides' trap is a reference to the dynamic that existed between Sparta and Athens before the Peloponnesian War. The idea is that Sparta was the dominant power and was worried about the rise of Athens, and that this led to the war. Now, it's worth noting that the trap concept has been around for a decade, and not all foreign policy people think it's relevant. One I know rolls his eyes any time somebody mentions the Peloponnesian War as some form of predictor of modern geopolitics. But they used it. By them referencing the trap, they're saying they are a rising power that could replace the dominant power. That's the U.S. If you read between the lines, and sometimes it's just the lines, you realize the Chinese are saying they want peace and trade. They don't want to decouple the economies. They don't want a Cold War, which also is kind of foreign policy 101. But they felt the need to say it pretty bluntly right now. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.